So on this note, let's go back to green development standards. So green development standards, they're standards implemented by municipalities to really advance the sustainable community, the sustainable design of their communities. And really what it comes down to, it's not like municipalities have been doing this work for ages. They've always looked at kind of these site plan, not always, but in the last, all throughout our lives, they've been the one managing the site plan design of the communities and making sure that it's conducive with the neighborhoods and all that work, and advancing some of the kind of sustainability initiatives. And really what it comes down to, yes, you'll get, like, it doesn't mean like you necessarily need green development standards. You'll get these little token developments that are greenier coming out. But this movement of all developments towards a certain advancement on sustainability is something that green development standards give municipalities the ability to advance. This isn't piecemeal. This is about kind of looking at it all across all developments within the community, and not just kind of trying to advance a few token greenie actions, which is what we did in the early 2000s as part of that. And green development standards starts changing the planning process to get everybody talking together about all of the sustainability metrics that we're all looking for in our communities and across Ontario as a whole. So really what it's in. And one of the key things on this one is, one of the important aspects of green development standards is they provide transparency to everyone. Everyone right from the beginning of the development application process can see exactly what the metrics are that the municipality and the community is seeking. The developers know it right from the get-go. They have the best chance at that point in time of incorporating as much as they can into their development, because this decision-making and planning is happening right from the beginning of the development application process. So I did want to kind of highlight on that. So what are green development standards? There are a whole bunch of different metrics that don't only look at energy. We do get caught up on the energy and GHG performance of the buildings, and that's definitely one of the metrics. But it's not the only one. There's things with regards to looking at it from the kind of community level, access to green space, access to transit, access to amenities, those types of things. And then there's also an element with regards to the green infrastructure. What's the depth of the soil that's going to be requirement? We've learned along the way that a lot of the developments in our past do not have the soil depth that they need to have to maintain a healthy canopy. And so that increasing soil depth has been recognized as one of the most important factors of maintaining and protecting the urban forest. How much precipitation is going to get dealt with on site rather than going to the stormwater system? How much active transportation infrastructure is going to be available for folks? Is it going to be bird-friendly design? So there's a whole bunch of different metrics that are part of green development standards. Energy and GHG performance is absolutely one of them, but it's not the only one. So why does municipality need green development standards? Well, it used to be that municipalities, one of the strongest authorities municipalities had was with regards to new development. How is new development going to kind of take place across their communities? That was one of the few areas of authorities municipalities had to be able to advance their environmental and climate change goals. And so as climate emergencies are being declared all over the world, as our population is growing, we know it's absolutely critical that we get as close to net zero emission buildings as quickly as possible. And if we, and not delaying on this and building the market transformation and the labor transformation that's needed to move us in this direction. And if we don't start planning for that now, we know that it's not just going to happen organically by 2030 or 2035. This takes a huge amount of collective effort across a whole bunch of different sectors. And municipal green development standards are a mechanism municipalities have been moving to help to move the market in that direction. And they're one of the few powerful tools that was available to them. So yeah. So obviously GHG emissions, buildings account for one. This is from Ontario perspective, but that's the minimum probably within any of your communities of 21%. It goes from anywhere from 21% all the way up to 56%, I think, in Toronto. But it's a significant chunk of the pie of our greenhouse gas emissions. And if we don't address the building sector, there's not a chance that we can ever achieve our GHG reduction targets. So addressing decarbonization and the energy efficiency in our buildings is absolutely critical. And yes, existing buildings are a huge beast that are going to have to be handled on this one. but we know that every building that is built now will have to be retrofitted within 10 to 15 years to meet that GHG standard. And it seems so ridiculous that we would actually just maintain the Ontario Building Code and not help move the market towards where they need to be going, and ensuring that kind of innovation is taking place on an ongoing basis. And that municipal green development standards have helped to drive that innovation within the development building community. So really, as I said, the value proposition for this all, they're integrating the standards and requirements all into one place, creates transparency for everyone so they know exactly what the metrics are going to be and what they're desired right from the beginning of the application process, giving them maximum chances to incorporate it into their development. And it really is one of the kind of opportunities to advance that local economic development and building that the low carbon building sector that we need to be able to address not only our new buildings, but existing buildings as a whole as well. And it's the most beautiful kind of bringing it all together: public health, climate change, energy transformation, clean tech, efficient resource use. It is one of those ones that brings a whole bunch of Venn diagrams together. So the tools for municipalities really comes down to the site plan controls. Yes, you're going to do an amendment to your official plan to authorize those kind of authorities, but it does come from, the authorities come from the Planning Act and Section 41 of the Planning Act. And that's really where it is. There's a powers for green development standards within the Municipal Act, and then they're enacted and implemented through the Planning Act. Municipalities need to make an official plan amendment to activate the green municipal standard authorities, and then it gets implemented through the development application process. So it's this Section 41 of the Planning Act that's one of the municipal authorities that allow these green development standards to take place, and it's the sustainable design that is the magic word in the legislation of the Planning Act that is enabling green development standards. And the Bill 23 would remove everything relating to this one, just slash and burn that one. So that's something that that we don't want to have happen, because municipalities have very few actually authorities that can really kind of help move the market towards the transformation that we need. And this was one of them. And then the province comes and takes that away from the municipalities. It's one thing not to be able to have the help that municipalities need moving forward to be able to act on their climate change opportunities. It's a completely different thing to take away existing authorities that municipalities are using to advance their climate change mandates. So really what it came down to, it at a minimum, maintaining sustainable design in this section of the Planning Act was what would be required to continue on with the green development standards authorities. Did want to highlight, again, this is not just green development standards for benefits for municipalities on this. It's for the benefit to the occupants of these buildings moving forward. They're more efficient homes. They're more resilient. They can actually address infrastructure costs if we do this right, in terms of the increasing densification, increasing intensification, and using the maximum amount of existing infrastructure that we can. It kind of helps to bring together the connected communities and advance complete communities. It really helps with the resilience of buildings, because the more efficient a building is, in the event of power disruption, the more efficient the building is and the better building envelope is, the longer you can shelter in place associated with that. So I did want to highlight, just going through it, some of the examples. There's a whole bunch of green development standards in play, and a whole bunch of municipalities advancing green development standards at present too. Sorry. So Toronto Green Development Green Standard is one of those standards out there. It's a tiered progressive approach. The Whitby Green Standard also follows that tiered approach. So tier 1 is what's mandatory, and tier 2 and 3 are voluntaries tiers, but every 3 to 4 years, the Green Development Standard will get rid of the lower tier and move tier 1 into tier 2 into tier 1's position, and then so forth. So towards helping the market move towards the eventual destination where we all know we need to go, which is net zero emission buildings, so as close to net zero emission buildings as we can. So that's one of the examples. I did want to kind of give a little bit of the highlights on some of the green development metrics, because again, we often get caught up in the energy and GHG ones, but I did want to highlight EV charging is part of it. With regards to solar readiness, I did want to highlight a bunch of things as well. That's part of that. Did want to highlight this is the tiered approach that many of the municipalities are using for their tiered, and this is the leading practice in green development standards thus far. So I did want to kind of highlight just an example of that, but I won't want to read it because I'd rather leave time for discussions on this one. The Whitby Green Standard is again using, I just wanted to highlight the Planning Act and Section 41 authorities, which have been removed as part of Bill 23. Did want to kind of highlight the resources that are provided to the development community to clearly identify the rationale for each of the metrics and how they will be demonstrated. These are the green development standards that are already in play in Ontario, and there's a number of 6 that are advancing green development standards as well within their communities. Markham and Brampton are the newest, most recent ones that have updated their green development standard, making the energy and GHG metric requirement. Before it was an option that they could pick and the developers could pick and choose from. They recognized they weren't getting the uptake that they needed on their energy metric, and they moved towards a required metric. Halton Hills just upped the points on their green development on the energy metric within their building, recognizing again that the voluntary approach wasn't getting the uptake that they desired. So really, it is one of the few municipal authorities that are available for you to enact and act on your climate change commitments and addressing the emissions from our building, and addressing the drive to move the market towards the most efficient, best buildings we can build. Recognizing that we want to make sure that it costs, and over the longer term, this will save the people who own these buildings money. There is a toolkit for everything you wanted to know about green development standards, but was afraid to ask. If you're interested in getting more information, I will throw the link in the chat, and I will stop sharing now. And